Hello and welcome to Spooning with me, Mark Wogan. We are here in the Mount Street restaurant with a very special guest who awaits to be fed spoons by me whilst wearing a blindfold. Now, as ever, Jamie Shears, the executive chef, has been cooking up a storm downstairs for my very special guest. And they are occasionally known as tuppence. They are a screenwriter, a playwright, a politician, and an author. Now, he's a man who's had many ups and downs, more ups than downs, one might argue, and I think we can learn a lot from him, but he is here to talk about his new book, An Eye for an Eye. Please, will you welcome to Spooning, Lord Archer, or as we like to call him, Geoffrey.
Quite right, Mark.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well indeed.
It's lovely to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, because I was shocked when I had your invitation.
Really?
Because I am not a foodie. I am not a man who...
We've had lots of those on.
You've had lots of those. My closest friend, Chris Beatles, is a foodie, and he takes me to restaurants, and he instructs me clearly. In fact, once in Italy, when we were at a restaurant, the chef came out to meet him and never spoke to me once. And they discussed sauces and the difference a sauce can make to a meal.
Well,
I was lost.
This is not instructional. It is, we go on a journey. We go on a journey through your food history because obviously before you come on, we ask you a series of questions about your food loves and your food hates.
Yes.
And we put together a little menu and hopefully please you, maybe challenge you. But let's kick off with, now, this particular dish seems to be an author's favourite.
Oh.
We had a new author on recently, Louise Minchin.
Yes.
Who has written a fantastic first book.
Yes, amazing success.
And you and her share this.
What?
Fish and chips.
A woman as intelligent as that?
Yes.
I love fish and chips.
Now, tell me why, because I mean, it was very clear. It was like, our first question is food loves, and it was just fish and chips.
I come from Weston-super-Mare,
Yep.
and I learnt at a very young age the difference between people who deliver and people who don't. We had two shops in Weston-super-Mare, two fish and chip shops, next to each other. One was called Coffin's, and the other I don't even remember the name of. Mm-hmm. Coffin's would sell you fish and chips, was a bob a lot, just after the war.
But
hold your breath.
Yep.
5p. So a bob a lot meant what it said.
I've got to be honest,
bob was 5p.
That costs a little bit more in Mayfair.
Just a little bit more at this famous restaurant. And I used to get in the queue at Coffin's, and there was always a queue at Coffin's, and the next day shop was empty. And what it taught me was, here were two shops next to each other, one a brilliant success, one a complete failure. Why? Because Coffin's fish and chips were wonderful.
Well, I'd like to know, and it is yours to eat at your leisure, but I'd like to know what you think of Mayfair fish and chips.
Right now?
Yeah, go on. Have a little go on that and tell me whether that competes with Coffin's.
With Coffin's.
Was it Coffin's as in the box you end up in?
Yes.
Oh.
The queue was round the block.
They didn't focus on branding. They obviously focused on the quality of the product.
The war.
Exactly. Come down Coffin's for a bit of fish. How is that?
Oh, it's just class.
Yeah.
And the mistake you can make with fish and chips, and it's made again and again, is the chips.
Yeah.
They give you a good fish, and then they give you watery chips or fat.
No.
You've got to get the chips right.
Soggy chips.
Whoops.
I don't like soggy chips, but those are triple cooked. Those good crunch,
crispy,
good crunch.
Yep, we come here again.
Good. Well, that's past muster. Now you obviously mentioned Weston-super-Mare, which was the place of your birth there, and you had an interesting start to life. Dad was challenging as a parent, and that kind of thing. Died young, and you were sort of left
with my great mother, who was a fantastic woman. If she'd been born today, she'd be, she wrote her own book. She was on the Weston-super-Mare Council. Women weren't on councils.
But she was a journalist by trade.
Yes, and she was a journalist. So I was brought up by an amazing woman to whom I will be grateful forever.
And did she instill a love of writing and the written word in you? Is that where you think you got that from?
Possibly, not consciously. That was a man called Alan Quilter, who was my English master at Wellington School in Somerset, and he went on to be headmaster of Wells Cathedral School.
Wellington
and we
School
remained
in
friends.
Somerset, is that different to the other Wellington schools?
The other one's Wellington College, the
Yes.
posh school.
Yes.
We were Little Wellington School in Somerset. And yes.
But
and
you were a scholar there.
I was, and he gave me he gave me first a love of Shakespeare, a passionate love of Shakespeare, which has lasted all my life. Mary and I still go down to Stratford once every year. We stay at the Arden Hotel. We go on a Friday. We do a Friday night performance, a Saturday afternoon performance, and a Saturday evening performance. We did it about 3 weeks ago. And so we see 3 plays at the Royal Shakespeare Company every single year. So my love of Shakespeare has just gone on and on.
But you continued to be an academic, because obviously you went to Oxford, and were also quite a prolific athlete. Would you say you are ever so slightly competitive?
Oh, no, never. Absolutely not. Good heavens, what a suggestion. Yeah, I ran the 100 yards when I was at Oxford and had the honour of...
It was yards back then, people,
back
not
yards.
metres.
It was back then 9.6 yards, and I had the
you're
honour
sort of Usain Bolt standard at 9.6, aren't
if
you?
it had been metres. I squeezed into the British team, which was a great honour. I always look upon that as a great honour. So yes, I've always been competitive, and you can't want to run for your country and not be competitive. So yes, and that has continued right through my life.
And you met your better half there.
Mary was at St Anne's when I was at Brasenose. She went on, of course, to teach at Somerville. She then went on to teach at Trinity, Cambridge. She then went on to be head chairman of the hospital and then chairman of the Science Museum, the first woman ever to chair an.
I mean, she's arguably the more successful member of the family.
Far more.
Yes.
She's had a brilliant career. Brilliant career.
But, I mean, because that means, hold on, I'm looking at the year now, 1966. So that is now, you're approaching nearly...
I'm approaching 85.
Yes, no, you're approaching 85, but married. How long married?
We've been married 58 years.
58
and we're much looking forward to the 60th, which would be very special indeed.
I think you'll get that. I mean, looking at you now,
I hope we'll get
I mean, that one might argue you're either putting yourself in pickling vinegar at night, or there's a portrait
I have
in the
a wonderful. I'm Dorian Gray. Yes, I have a wonderful trainer, New Zealand lady, who's been with Mary and myself for 15 years. We have now reached a stage. We're so old. We're now reached a stage where it's 20 minutes of jogging and other things, but it's balance and stretching. We now do. I never thought of balance and stretching when I was young.
Well,
now
until you
I have
start
to
falling
stand.
over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make sure I can stand. Well, no, she puts me on rubber balls, makes me stand on one foot.
Well, what do you do in your spare time, Joan? Is none of our concern. But but what was incredible when I saw you downstairs and I read the notes, and you know, when you walked in, you don't have the appearance of a man of your age. You don't move. You don't look. So do you think that is down to the fact that you've always kept a level of athleticism throughout your life?
Yes, Mary adds to that. She says you've got to keep the brain working flat out as well. And she says one of the problems of retiring and not going to a job in the morning and just staying at home watching morning television, that's when it sets in. That has never happened to either of us. Here I am working with you this morning. I was up 6 to 8 writing. It's non-stop for me, and after I leave you, I have another show to go to. I sometimes wonder if it's worth it, but then I think when I was before I came to you this morning, I thought, would I rather be at home reading the morning papers?
I mean, probably. You may say that I should have stayed at home and read the papers once I've put you through this, but
no,
we'll see.
No, because that's what keeps me going.
Well, I think it is, you know.
How old are you, you worm?
54.
You haven't even begun.
Well, but, I think what you are displaying there is you can't hit a moving target.
That's true. Yeah,
although you have, in your life, taken some proper gut punches at various points.
Oh,
I mean, you were bankrupt in the 70s.
No,
Is that
faced bankruptcy.
Faced bankruptcy.
You're quite right. I got within inches of it and wrote my first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, when I was £400,000 in debt.
Well, every cloud.
What? Yes. Well, except...
Do you think you would have written that book if that company, what was it? It was
Aquablast.
Aquablast. If Aquablast was a success,
I'd have become Minister, Under Secretary of State for Transport.
There's certain detractors who would say, God, I wish Aquablast had worked. but I think, without it, you wouldn't have had this other extraordinary career.
When something goes badly wrong, you either got to change direction or work twice as hard. Looking back on it, people forget, and why should they remember? I was in debt for 7 years, and I can tell you, I've never faced anything to compare with debt. You get up each morning, how am I going to earn enough to pay for whatever it is? I can't pay the tax man. I had to make a deal with the tax man.
Did you have, because you had children at that stage as well?
2 young sons at school. Luckily, Cain and Abel changed that overnight.
Well, because the first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, was a sort of, I think they would describe it as a sleeper hit.
Yes.
It sold
3,000 copies.
Yeah.
And in paperback it sold 25,000. Doesn't help you clear a debt of 400,000. No.
But signing Cain and Abel for 2 million helps.
Yes, that was literally a change overnight. I brought a totally new meaning to the words nouveau riche.
And you've never necessarily hidden your riche. You've celebrated your riche.
I get annoyed with people who, it's wrong to be an entrepreneur. It's wrong. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I must confess to you that it's irrelevant to me now. At 84, you don't give a damn. The money is not important. I write because I love writing. I was up at 6 to 8 this morning because I love writing.
Well, that kind of rigor and that kind of competitive nature that you have, do you think that plays a role in how you approach it? Because your approach to writing is very disciplined, isn't it?
Yes.
And do you still write
Handwrite.
You write longhand?
Yes.
Which is something...
Because I can't, I don't know how to turn on the machinery, let alone work it.
But not only that, what is it you do on average 14 drafts of each book?
Yes. I mean, the book you have in front of you is the 14th draft.
Yeah. But I mean, you must be keeping your local Rymans going single-handedly with the amount of pens you must get through.
Well...
Do you have a preferred pen?
Yes, a Pilot felt tip. Okay. And my late secretary, Alison, was always looking for a better one, but I've never found anything better. And it moved. I hate biros. I hate them. They crunch across the paper. But the answer to your question is, I get up at 5:30. I work from 6 to 8, from 10 to 12, from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. Bed at 9:30. Up at 5:30. A first draft will be 40 days, 300 hours. And the book you have is the 14th draft. I wish there was a shortcut. You would think at my age I'd discovered some secret way of skipping 6 or 7 drafts. No. And if I may be allowed, I'll give you an example. In the next book, which is not published, but everybody knows the facts at the opening of the book. I don't mean they know my book. I mean they know the facts. We were trying to get the Olympic Games in Singapore for Britain. Seb Coe in charge. People have forgotten. They'll all remember, but people have forgotten that we won by 4 votes. We beat the French. 2 days later, there was a bomb on the underground. 2 people were killed and 70 went to hospital. Sebastian Coe has always said, if it was 2 days later, we wouldn't have got. Now, I found out a fact from the commander in charge of security, Bob Broadbank. He said, I was instructed to tell the team in the morning they must creep back to Britain, creep back to their homes. No celebration. Although this was the most wonderful achievement, no celebration. Here's the example coming up. I obviously I do in the book, the speech he gives to them. But they'd been up all night celebrating. They were either drunk or on a hangover. Because they had no, and then he told them this terrible thing. And I wrote the sentence, all of them were somber, not all of them were sober. Now that doesn't come on the first draft, Mark. I wish it did. That will come, the more it flows, the more you have a chance of putting in something.
But that's the thing, and that's what I get from reading about you and meeting you, is there is a tenacity and a competitiveness that has sort of driven you your whole life. Because
all my life.
You entered politics at the end of the 60s.
Too young. The biggest mistake I ever made in my life was entering the House of Commons at the age of 29. I was very pleased and privileged to advise several young members of Parliament, and I said the same thing to almost go in at 40, do something, have something to say, have achieved something. And 4 of them went on to go in the cabinet.
Well, you gave David Miller his first job.
Yes, indeed. David Miller was among the first, and then Sajid Javid, Robert Halfon, Priti Patel.
I mean, some of them would say thanks, but no thanks. But that's politics.
Yes.
It? And you then progressed to deputy chairman, and so you're deputy chairman of the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher.
Great lady.
And you're an incredibly successful author, and you become one of the more famous politicians out there. Fame finds you. How did you find that? Because it wasn't.
I wasn't aware of it at the time. Looking back, honestly, Mark, I wasn't. I remember your father calling me. I now realise that I was one of the lucky ones. But I didn't realise at the time.
You didn't call a lot of people.
I didn't.
No.
No. But he'd read Cain and Abel, and he wanted to have a chat. And then he put me on a show immediately, and I was unknown. But when you work for Margaret Thatcher, you didn't think that way. She was so big and she was so worldwide. You just got on with the job. I promise you, it's only years later you thought, my God, I was popping into Downing Street every couple of days. You don't give it a second thought until it's all over.
Yes, don't be in the moment.
Yes.
You're not in the moment.
No, you can't be. In a way, you can't be.
Well, the next dish has relevance to this period, which is
shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie. Now,
I
know why shepherd's pie is important to you.
Yes.
But
explain.
So, explain, because your shepherd's pie and crew parties were, for many years, the party to get invited
You're very
to.
kind.
Mary
you
were sort of like
that.
you were like a great Gatsby with a pie.
Well, Mary was very funny about that because it was champagne and shepherd's pie, and she said, "Don't you think we should have something a little more sophisticated?" So I said, "Certainly not. I'm a shepherd's pie man. It's making a statement." And of course, what I discovered was it wasn't making a statement. People would much rather have shepherd's pie than they would have some lobster beef squad. Forget it, shepherd's pie. And I'll tell you a lovely story about Tom King, who was Secretary of State for Defence at one of the parties. And he came with his bodyguards, 3 bodyguards, because he was Secretary of State for Defence. And they all had a shepherd's pie in a private room while the Secretary of State went to the party. And then because I used to hold 3 in a row, and he came the next day. I said, "Forgive me for mentioning this, Secretary of State, but you came yesterday." He said, "Yes, Jeffrey. 3 different bodyguards this time." They came.
They came for the pie.
They didn't come for me. They came for the shepherd's pie.
And what a lot of people don't know is it became such a thing that you did hold 3 because you couldn't get everybody in on the first one. But you had someone really, like your first one ever, you had John Profumo.
Yes, Jack Profumo, you're quite right. And his wife, Valerie, and Alec Douglas Hume. I'm so old. Yes, and looking back Jack, one of the nicest men I've ever known in my life, who then spent the rest of his life working for charity, and we remained close friends. I liked him very much indeed. And yes, it would go right through from there to, we did the last party last year. We finished last year. We decided had to come to an end at some point.
Never made it.
No,
never,
you weren't.
never
No,
made
you
the
fe- you
never
weren't.
made the invite.
You weren't important.
They're not happening anymore.
No, you weren't.
Never going
No,
to get to go.
You might have just made it this year.
Well, so I mean, talking of friends, obviously you've had highs and lows, and some of the lows are extraordinary, and you've well documented them in books, and you know, having done a little, as they say, time behind the door. But some quite interesting people remained friends, because when something like that happens to you, when you are publicly shamed, humiliated, and you end up somewhere, that's when you find out who your friends are.
Correct.
And it was quite extraordinary sort of breadth of people who remained friends.
It was touching.
You've had highs and lows, and have ended up in some pretty dark places in your life. So when you find yourself in prison, I think that's sort of the pinnacle of when you discover who your friends are.
Absolutely.
And it's reading up on it. There's an interesting breadth of people who did remain friends and remained loyal to you, like proper friends.
Yes, quite right.
I mean, like Barry Humphries, for example.
God bless Barry.
Who was an extraordinary individual.
Oh, great man.
And I think
great man.
And I think
and Margaret Thatcher.
And Margaret Thatcher, of course, as well. And even people who sort of had to sort of publicly denounce you, privately remained your friends.
Absolutely. The loveliest story on that, which sums it all up, is we held that Christmas party, the Shepherd's Pie party, after I came out. And the press said, how many will turn up? And it became a subject, how many people would turn out.
I remember.
And the Evening Standard cartoon was a picture of the party, which we have, absolutely packed with people. And one person is saying to another, oh, I didn't think you were going to come. They were all there. I lost 4 people. I lost 4 people who I thought were friends, and I got it wrong. But people like Barry Humphries don't desert you. Mind you, Barry came to see me only 2 or 3 weeks before he died. He came to see me at the flat, and we were discussing a particular oil painting on the wall. And Mary walked into the room, and he said, Mary, I have a word that encapsulates you. I have a word that sums you up. And he put his arm around me and looked at her and said, tolerant.
Yes. I mean, one might argue, because, I mean, as much as it has happened to you, it's also happened to your family.
Oh, yes.
As well.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, I grew up with, as you know, a significant parent.
A great man who I loved.
And, you know, at times that was challenging. How is it for your boys, that kind of thing?
It's a good question, and you'd be better at answering it than I would.
I would imagine awful at points.
What's William, one son, says, you cast a dark shadow, Dad. And by the way, Mum doesn't help, because she became a DBE, she became a dame in her own right, she became the first woman to chair a National Gallery or museum. So they have suffered, if that's the right word, and not always benefited.
But both successful in their own right.
Oh, yes.
Which
thank God.
Well, I mean, I think
thank God.
That can be a byproduct of having 2 significant parents. I mean,
yes.
One was hard enough, but 2 significant parents. To think, how, because every son wants to supersede their father.
Of course he does.
You know, and when their dad is Jeffrey Archer, and, you know, that can seem like a mountain to climb.
Well, I like to kid myself. They face that very well. I remember when Cain and Abel came out, I used to drive the children to school because I was all right, whereas Mary was teaching at Trinity, so she had to be at work. And so I was chosen to drive the children at school. So when you say, did it affect them? No, the children said, is your dad out of work? So no, we got through that period.
Because I mean, I would assume what I like is that there are various points at which the world at large, or those close, or would have written you off.
Oh yes, and 4 people did.
Who were they?
But the Barry Humphrey gang
Yeah.
didn't. My publisher, a particular lady who shall be nameless,
Disappointing. But
disappointing, be nameless, dropped me. Macmillan took me over and claimed they made 100 million in the next 10 years.
Well,
And she dropped me because she said, no, not she said, the public will desert him. They didn't. The book sales went up.
well, I mean, you did very cleverly write about your experience in prison,
Yes.
which
Well, I was bored, actually. I wrote it because, and I met some amazing people, and I wanted to write about them, and I realized what a privileged life I'd had.
But you almost got into trouble doing that.
Yes.
Because it's a sort of,
They
isn't it?
didn't
It's,
like
it's the unwritten rule that you
Yes.
don't talk about who you're inside with.
Well, I asked every one of them, of course, and yes, there was some. I mean, there was a man there. I wrote a short story about him, who committed a crime every September, October. And I said, "Why do you commit a crime every September, October?" He said, "Well, it's a simple crime, Geoffrey. I throw a brick through a window. I don't take the jewellery. The police are there before, and I get arrested as my hand is going in. That's fine. I get 6 months, and I'm in out of the cold." And I thought that was a terrible story. A terrible story. He went to prison every October to March, because he didn't want to be out on the streets in the cold. So I turned it into a short story.
Well, I mean, if the new Labour government go ahead with their price caps, we might have more people trying
Yes.
to do that.
Very sad. So I saw a lot of sadness. I saw a lot of people who hadn't had the privilege of a good mother, were on drugs, which I could never understand. So I saw, and I got that into the books. You're quite right, because I always say to young people, write about what you know about.
But yes, you committed a crime, but you were put into prisons that weren't commensurate with the type of crime.
No, that was interesting, but only for a short time.
Yeah.
But yes.
But do you think you were made an
wouldn't-
example of? Would you
yes,
say that
probably.
was the case?
Probably. And I was surrounded by murderers. And they were so gentle with me. They were so, people often
That
say,
was what I was going to ask. Were you ever
no,
scared
never
for your life?
physically frightened at any time. And the most touching thing was, because people came for advice or came to talk about their lives, the most touching thing was they stopped swearing in front of me, because I wouldn't talk to people who swore. I said, "You come again, but no swear words, thank you." And they'd come again. And whenever they saw me in a corridor, they stopped swearing. And I thought to myself, why can't they just stop full stop? Why do they need to stop for me? Just stop. And the ones on drugs, I couldn't understand. When I was put in charge of the hospital very quickly, the 3 doctors at the hospital put me in charge of that, which is one of the books was about. And these drug addicts were coming in one by one. So that in itself was an education.
Now, in the new book, there is a character who is in prison.
Yes.
Miles.
Billy Mumford.
Yeah, but there's also, the man set on revenge.
Miles Faulkner.
Miles.
Wicked Miles.
Now, I don't know why, but when I first started reading about Miles, I sort of thought...
You liked him immediately.
Well,
you are a tiresome fellow, Mark. Everybody writes saying they like Miles. They're meant to...
But I don't know whether it was good. I kind of envisage you in prison running the library as that kind of,
Yes.
that's where you held court and
Yes.
you
Yes.
sort of, as a man of letters and books and that kind of thing. Is there any of Miles?
Oh, yes.
In
No, he was
you?
my number 2. My number 2 in the library was a murderer. And he'd murdered... He ran a block of flats that his father had left him. And one person had left the flat untidy week after week after week and didn't pay. And he finally hit him and he fell over and died. So I've never forgotten the sentence he taught me. I said, "Could I murder someone?" He said, "No, you couldn't, Geoffrey." I said, "Why couldn't I murder someone?" He said, "Because you let it out the whole time. Your energy comes out the whole time. You're always," he said, "I was a very quiet, introvert person, and this man just drove me mad, and I finally hit him. You wouldn't do that because you're out there the whole time." And you see, you learn things like that would never happen. And he had to do, I think he was doing 14 years before he might get probation. He was a PhD. He was a highly intelligent man. When you say I was the academic, my underling, my number 2, was far brighter academically than I was, and very good company.
But stuck in the system.
Stuck, and he eventually got out, and more sad, Mark, more sad, he came to see me when he came out, and I tried to help in every way I could. He fell in love with a very nice girl. He brought her along to meet me, and I liked her a lot, and then he committed suicide. So I felt helpless. I thought the whole thing is just helpless.
And do you still have friends and connections from that time?
No, the 3 I liked immensely have all died. I'm 84!
Well, there is that. There is that. Now, we've got to that time in proceedings, Geoffrey. I am going to ask you to don the blindfold.
No, that's a shepherd's pie.
No.
I know a shepherd's pie when
No.
You don't have to insult me.
They're under the cloches. I've got a rather fetching.
You didn't even let me taste it.
Well, you can take that home with you. I've got a rather fetching leopard print one for you.
Gosh, that's sexy.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you ever had to wear anything like that in prison, but There we go. But
that's sexy.
Pop that on.
It's a bra. It's not a very tiny girl, but it's a bra.
There we go. Slip that on.
Here we go.
Slip that on. Once that is secure, I will now bring in the plate.
Right. I can hear noise.
So, Geoffrey, you've got the blindfold on.
Yes.
I'm going to unveil these spoons now.
Yes.
And I am going to feed you. So this is
you're going to feed me?
This is a trust exercise. This is your first spoon. So lean forward a little. Lean forward a little. There we go. The spoon is right in front. Oh, there we go. And what have you got there? What flavours are you getting? What textures are you getting? Do we like it? I mean, words help at this point.
It's a vegetable of some sort.
No.
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 No. No idea at all.
It's jolly nice, by the way.
Good. Well, in that case, you can take the blindfold off because I've got phenomenal news for you. Pop that off.
No, I want to think.
Oh, okay. He's still going. It's definitely not a vegetable, though.
I'm beaten.
It's sushi.
It's whaty?
Sushi. Which you said you hated.
I like that one. No, I avoid them when I see the word. You're quite right.
There
I
we
walk
go.
on.
So that is sushi.
I hate it.
That is
I hate
tuna
it.
sushi with a light soy dressing.
Nil all.
I think we might have changed Geoffrey's opinion
Oh.
there. Well, we don't know. We don't know. Pop that off for a minute, because
Off.
Take that off for a minute. Now, obviously, you've had a long career in politics and entered the House of Lords, but this year you drew a line under it all.
I retired, yes.
Yes. Was that sad for you, or you just had enough?
Neither, in a way, Mark. I just felt the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, had said in the Labour Party manifesto, I will be getting rid of the hereditary peers, and I will be asking peers over the age of 80 to retire.
Right.
20 of us retired on the same day. I would be 89, if I lived that long, at the next election, and I thought Keir Starmer had got that right. So I didn't argue with it. I'm still allowed to sit on the steps of the throne and listen to a debate. I'm not allowed to vote, and I'm not allowed to speak. I can still dine at the House of Lords, and I retain my title.
Now, you strike me as a man that might find that last bit difficult, not being allowed to speak.
Well, I'm very privileged. Here am I on the programme with you, allowed to speak.
Yes.
I have so many outlets where I'm allowed to give my opinion that won't be a great loss. I've given it a lot of thought. When I went into the House a couple of days ago, Ken Clarke was sitting there. We're the same age. He's one of the most outstanding men of my generation. And I thought, he's still very wise. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people like Ken Clarke should be allowed to stay and bring years of wisdom to the Lords.
I mean, is there an element with the 20 that resigned all on the same day that you jumped before you were pushed? Or
No, I think all of us felt we weren't contributing enough. When I was first, Margaret Thatcher put me up, and then John Major made me a Lord, and because she was thrown out, as you know. And I felt after I'd served both of them, after I'd finished with John Major, and I had a voting record of 98% and an attendance record of 97%, and the Labour Party came in under Tony Blair, I did bring in 2 bills during that period. One I'm very proud of that never became law. I brought in the primogeniture bill, that whoever was the firstborn in the royal family would be monarch whether they were a girl or a boy. I was very proud of that. And I also put down an amendment I wish they'd put through on the House of Lords bill. I said, let's keep every single hereditary, 1,100 of them. But when they die, their sons cannot, you heard me say sons, because it's disgraceful that a daughter can't take the place. The sons can't take their place. We'd now be down to about 20. In a very British type way, they would have just drifted out. But my amendment was voted down by hereditary peers.
Okay.
And then they decided to have this strange election of 93 of them, which I never fully understood.
So, are there elements of it that you'll be glad to see the back of? I mean, you know, one would argue that on both sides of the pond at the moment, a state of politics is pretty ropey in terms of the reputations that are associated with being in power.
I agree. When I entered the House at the age of 29, MPs were respected. Alec Douglas-Home was Prime Minister, followed by Harold Wilson, and the relationships were far better. I liked Harold Wilson as a man, and I became a friend towards the end of his life, and his wife Mary. We don't seem to get that nowadays, and the story I always tell, it just comes into my mind, is when John Smith had a heart attack. Very great loss to the Labour Party. He'd have been a great Prime Minister. I was on a tour of Scotland for the party in the days when you could go from Glasgow to Edinburgh and never leave Conservative land. And John went into hospital with a heart attack. And I rang the matron and said, I'm in Edinburgh tomorrow. I'm walking the streets with Malcolm Rivkin. Could I come in and see him? And of course I understand if he feels it would be inappropriate. And the matron rang back and said, he'd love to see you. And I went to see him and sat on the end of the bed, and they were in opposition. And he wasn't shadow leader then. He was shadow business secretary. And he said, I've got something for you, Geoffrey. I've just appointed 2 men as my trainees, or whatever word you want to use, my underlings, whatever word you want to use, in the ministry as we prepare for government. We're coming back, he said. I've chosen a man called Gordon Brown, and I've chosen a man called Tony Blair. Keep your eye on them, Geoffrey.
Whatever happened to those 2?
And what I loved then is, and I met yesterday the Provost of Glasgow University, yesterday, and he said, we remember you, Geoffrey. You and Michael Heseltine were defending Her Majesty's government at Glasgow University. We lost the vote by 743 to 11, and they gave us, the students, gave us a standing ovation. Have those days gone when you could go to Glasgow and defend a Conservative government and get a standing ovation?
Yeah,
They've gone.
I think.
Well, that's very sad.
Well, But I think there's a lot of professionalism to politics now, isn't there? There's people that is their career.
Oh, yes. When I first went in, I sat between Admiral Sir Hugh Munro Lucas Tooth. Yes. Now you can't believe it, can you?
It's strange that a name that is that much of a mouthful has the word tooth
Admiral.
in it.
And I said, "What are you doing here, Admiral?" He said, "I've come to serve." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the war is over. I've come to serve my country." "Do you want to be a minister?" I said, No, Geoffrey, it's the last thing I want. I want to serve my country and my constituency. Those days, I think, have gone.
Well, there is something we do have to do again.
Yes, sir.
Which is you have to put the blindfold on
I made a
again.
complete fool of myself the first time.
Well, maybe we can get it right next time. So if you pop the blindfold back
You're
on.
a bad man.
Here's your second and final spoon. I'm going to reveal this now. Are you ready, sir? Here we go. Open wide. There we go. What have we got there? There's got to be some robust flavours that are springing to the fore there. Is it nice? Are we enjoying it?
No, don't particularly like it.
Oh.
Now you'll tell me it's one of my favourites. Yes, sir. Oh, God, I'm pathetic. It's a pudding of some sort.
Yes, we got that right.
And it could be creme brulee.
Take the blindfold off, Geoffrey.
Oh, God, humility again.
So that is the embodiment of your favourite dessert, which is affogato, but that is coffee-flavoured ice cream.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You
Not
take your ice
except
cream,
when you've got a blindfold on.
and they're different. Yes, you got me. I love it. I have what's called a demi, because Mary won't let me have two. One piece of ice cream with the coffee poured over. But you'd be amazed. No, you wouldn't. People would be amazed by how from place to place it can be brilliant in one place and not good.
Awful.
And am I allowed to mention a restaurant name
Yes,
or not?
of course.
Lucio's in the Fulham Road makes the best affogato. The boss, Lucio, who used to take care of Princess Diana, of course, he introduced me to affogato, and I only have it now when I go to his restaurant.
And I'm only a demi man myself. I
You're
think it should only be one scoop with a shot of espresso over the top.
Yes.
So it's vanilla ice cream with a shot of espresso.
Absolutely agreed.
But this being Mayfair, we've made you espresso ice cream. So it's pretty much there.
Not as good as Lucio.
I'll let head chef Jamie Shears know. Now,
well done, sir.
But as a storyteller, it's quite hard to engage you. You know what you're looking for in a story. And there is definitely a great story in this one. I've loved
very
this.
kind.
I think it's a great book, but then you've had a bit of experience with that sort of stuff. I mean,
I've been very lucky.
I think there's that thing where there are a lot of authors, they get maybe 10 books deep, and it's sort of they're just bashing them out.
Yeah.
Whereas
and we know one who's not even writing them, but the name is still on the cover.
Who could that be? I wonder. But I wish you every success with this. Not that you need me to say that, because it will be a success, like all your books. It's been a pleasure to have you.
I want to end on something.
Oh,
Are you ready?
There am I trying to end things up.
We were down in Chepstow the other day to I'm happy to say a packed audience, still turning out. And afterwards, I was signing books, and a man came up and said, "Are you very good, Geoffrey, or is it that I just don't get out very much?"
Read Geoffrey's books if you don't get out much. I'm being unfair. This is a great book, like all your books. You don't have a career of 42 books unless you're good at it, and you are good at it. And long may you continue to be good at it. That is all for this week. Thank you, of course, to Lord Archer, or as we like to say, Geoffrey, for taking part and taking on the spoons. I mean, obviously...
Failed
miserably, but we did change his mind as well. Join me next week when I will have, of course, another very special guest here joining me at the Mount Street restaurant. Thanks as ever to the team here. And, of course, until then, Stay beautiful.